She placed a faded stuffed giraffe into her husband's suitcase, tucked it beneath the folded shirts and the pressed slacks he packed every time he flew to Atlanta. She did not know why she did it. Something in her gut whispered, "Do it." Something in her chest tightened like a fist, and she listened. 48 hours later, that toy would unravel 8 years of marriage. It would expose a second apartment, a second woman, and a child that was never supposed to exist. But here is the part nobody expected. What broke her was not the betrayal, it was what she heard through the phone, a conversation she was never meant to witness that changed everything. This is the story of Deja Johnson, a mother, a teacher, a wife who trusted her husband with her whole life, and the night she discovered he had been living two of them. It was a Friday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of morning that looks normal on the outside but feels heavy on the inside. The sun pushed through the curtains of a small brick house on Waverly Drive. The coffee pot beeped, the kids argued over cereal. Everything looked the way it always did. Deja Johnson stood at the kitchen counter, pouring orange juice for her 7-year-old daughter, Layla, and her 4-year-old son, Micah. She was 34 years old, an elementary school teacher at Briarwood Academy. She had been married to her husband, Ben, for 8 years, and for most of those years, she believed she had a good life. Not perfect, but steady, predictable, safe. Ben worked as a project manager for a construction company. His job required travel, 2, sometimes 3 trips a month, usually to Atlanta, sometimes Raleigh. He always came back tired, kissed the kids, fell asleep watching ESPN, and Deja never questioned it, not once, because she trusted him. But something had shifted in the last 3 months, small things at first. Ben started keeping his phone face down on the counter. He took calls in the garage. He showered the second he walked through the door. And when Deja asked how the Atlanta trips were going, his answers had gotten shorter, vague, careful. Fine, same as always. That was his answer for everything now. Fine, same as always. But it was not the same. Deja could feel it, not in her head, in her body, a low hum in her chest that would not go away, like a smoke alarm with a dying battery, not loud enough to scream, just loud enough that she could not sleep. Last Tuesday, she found a receipt in his jacket pocket, a restaurant in Buckhead, 2 entrees, 1 dessert, shared. She stared at it for a long time, then she put it back. She told herself she was overreacting. She told herself good wives do not snoop. But here's the truth about instinct. It does not care what you tell yourself. It speaks anyway. That Friday morning, while the kids ate breakfast, Deja stood in the bedroom packing Ben's suitcase. His flight left at noon. She folded his shirts, she lined up his socks, and then her hand brushed something in the back of the closet. A stuffed giraffe. Small, faded. The stitching on one ear was coming loose. She held it in both hands and felt something crack inside her. This was the toy she and Ben had bought for Layla before she was born. They found it at a thrift store in Durham the day they learned they were having a girl. Ben had laughed and said it was ugly. Deja had said it was perfect. They bought it for $3 and brought it home in a brown paper bag. She had not seen it in 5 years, and she could not explain the feeling that washed over her. It was not nostalgia, it was not sadness, it was certainty, the kind that lives in the body and does not ask permission. Without thinking, she placed the giraffe at the bottom of Ben's suitcase, beneath the shirts, beneath the slacks, buried deep. She zipped the bag shut and carried it to the front door. Ben left at 11. He kissed Layla on the forehead, ruffled Micah's hair, and told Deja he would be back Sunday night. She smiled, she waved, she watched his car disappear down Waverly Drive. And then she stood in the doorway, alone, holding a feeling she could not name yet. Something was coming. She did not know what, but she knew one thing. She had just set something in motion that could not be undone. If you have ever felt something was wrong but couldn't prove it, stay, because what that toy uncovers next will leave you speechless. The rest of Friday was a performance. Deja picked up the kids from after-school care. She made spaghetti. She helped Layla with her reading homework. She gave Micah a bath. She did it all with a smile. And the whole time, her mind was in Atlanta. At 9 o'clock, after the house went quiet, Deja sat on the edge of her bed and opened the family phone plan on her laptop. She had never checked it before, but tonight, her fingers moved across the keyboard like they had been waiting for this moment. Ben's phone pinged at the hotel at 5. Normal. Then a restaurant in Midtown at 7:30. Then at 9:15, his location moved to a residential address in Buckhead, an apartment complex called the Ashford. He arrived at 9:22. He was still there at midnight. He was still there at 1 in the morning. Deja screenshotted every location, every timestamp. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to put the laptop down twice. She wanted to call him, she wanted to scream into the phone and demand answers, but she did not, because her mother had taught her something a long time ago. Never confront without proof. Emotion without evidence gives the liar room to flip the script. Her mother, Lorraine, knew what she was talking about. She had spent 20 years married to a man who lied the way other men breathed. Easily, naturally, without effort. She left that marriage with nothing. No savings, no property, no leverage, just a daughter and a suitcase, and the bitter education that love without awareness is a trap. So Deja waited. She sat in the dark bedroom and watched the blue dot on the screen sit at the Ashford Apartments until 2:47 in the morning. Then it moved back to the hotel. At 7 in the morning, Ben sent a text. "Meetings ran late. Miss you and the kids." Deja typed back 2 words. "Miss you too." The lie tasted different when she knew it was a lie. It sat heavy on her tongue, like copper, like blood. Saturday evening, something happened that tore the ground out from under her. She was scrolling through the family photo album on her phone, the shared iCloud account, and a new photo appeared. It had synced automatically from Ben's phone, an accidental upload, a mistake he would never know he made. It was a sonogram, black and white, dated 2 weeks ago, and the name printed across the top was not Deja Johnson. It was Tiffany Wells. Deja dropped the phone. It hit the bathroom tile and the screen cracked down the center. She stared at it on the floor. A sonogram. A baby. Someone else's baby. Her husband's baby. And in that moment, the feeling she had carried for 3 months, that quiet hum, that dying battery alarm, exploded into something enormous. Not grief, not rage, something worse. Clarity. Tiffany Wells. Deja had never heard that name in her life. She sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked so the kids wouldn't see her cry, and she searched that name on every platform she could find. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. She found her in under 3 minutes. 26 years old. Hairstylist at a salon in Atlanta called Glow Studio. Pretty. Young. Smiling in every photo like a woman who believed her life was going exactly the way it was supposed to. And on her Instagram, posted 4 weeks ago, a baby shower. Pink balloons, a cake that read "Baby Girl Loading." Friends gathered around her, hands on her belly, laughing. Deja zoomed into every photo. She studied every detail the way a detective studies a crime scene. And then she found it. In the background of one photo, barely visible, cut off at the edge of the frame, a man's wrist, wearing a silver watch with a blue face. The Citizen Eco-Drive that Deja had bought Ben for their 5th anniversary. She had the receipt in her bedside drawer. She put the phone down. She pressed her forehead against the cold tile floor and cried until her ribs ached. This was not a one-night mistake. This was not a drunken trip that went too far. This was a relationship, a pregnancy, a baby shower, a life being built in another city with money from her household. But Deja Johnson was not a woman who stayed on the floor. She never had been. Her mother raised her in a 2-bedroom apartment in Durham with heat that only worked half the time. She learned early that crying was allowed, but quitting was not. She wiped her face, she washed her hands, she looked at herself in the mirror and made a decision. She was not going to scream. She was not going to beg. She was not going to give Ben the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. She was going to be smart. Sunday morning, she called her mother. Lorraine listened to every word without interrupting. When Deja finished, there was a long silence. Then Lorraine spoke 5 words that rewired her daughter's entire strategy. Do not leave yet. Get everything. Her mother just told her to stay, not out of weakness, out of war. What Deja does next is the reason this story exists. Subscribe now. Lorraine was not a bitter woman. She was an educated one, educated by 20 years of learning the hard way what happens when a woman leaves a marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back and a child in her arms. It took her 7 years to buy a used car, 9 years to own a home, 12 years to feel safe again. She swore her daughter would never walk that road. You document everything before he knows you know, Lorraine said. Bank statements, credit cards, every trip, every receipt, every location. You build the case before you show your hand. I hear you, Mama. And you call a lawyer tomorrow morning, not next week, tomorrow. For the next 5 days, Deja became 2 people. On the outside, she was the same wife Ben had always known. She cooked his favorite meals, she asked about work and smiled at his answers. She kissed him goodnight and lay beside him in the dark. On the inside, she was building a case that would turn everything he thought was safe to ash. Every night, after Ben fell asleep, she photographed his phone screen. She saved receipts from his wallet. She pulled bank statements going back 6 months and highlighted every withdrawal she could not explain. 500 here, 800 there, 1,200 in 1 month alone. Small enough to avoid attention, large enough to add up. $14,000 gone, pulled from their joint savings over 6 months in amounts designed to stay invisible. Money Deja had contributed to every month from her teaching salary, money she thought was building their children's future, money that was building someone else's life instead. On day 3, Deja met with a divorce attorney named Claudette Rivers, a sharp woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a voice that sounded like she had heard every version of this story and still cared about each one. Claudette looked over the evidence and leaned back in her chair. In North Carolina, marital misconduct affects alimony and asset division, she said. If we can prove the affair and the financial redirection, you are in a very strong position. But you have to be careful. If he suspects you know, he will start hiding money. He will not suspect anything, Deja said quietly. On day 5, while Ben was at work, Deja opened his laptop. He had left his email logged in, and what she found there was worse than the affair, worse than the baby, worse than the $14,000. It was a lease agreement, signed by Benjamin Johnson and Tiffany Wells, a 1-year lease on a 2-bedroom apartment at the Ashford in Buckhead. Move-in date, 3 months ago. Monthly rent, $2,200. Paid from a checking account Deja had never seen before. An account in Ben's name only, an account he had opened without telling her. He had not just cheated, he had built a home with another woman, furnished it, stocked it, lived in it on the nights he said he was in hotel rooms. He had created an entire second life and funded it with the future Deja thought they were building together. Deja sat in her car in the school parking lot during her lunch break. The engine was off, the windows were up, the air inside was stale and warm. And she cried. Not the quiet tears she had been managing in bathroom stalls for the past week. This time, she cried the kind of cry that comes from the center of the body, the kind that bends you forward and makes your ribs feel like they are cracking. A lease, not a hotel room, not a weekend fling, A home, a second life, built with her money, planned behind her back, maintained with her trust. She thought about every night she had spent alone in that house while Ben was supposed to be working late, every time she defended him to her sister who had never liked him, every parent-teacher night she attended alone because Ben had a flight to catch, every moment she had given him the benefit of the doubt, and he had used that doubt as a hiding place. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. How did I not see it? But the truth is, she did see it. She felt it 3 months ago when the shifts started. She saw the signs. She just did not want them to be real. And that is the cruelest part of betrayal. It does not just break trust. It makes you doubt the one person you should always believe in, yourself. Then Lila's voice echoed in her mind, something her daughter said at dinner last week. "Mommy, you always tell us to be brave. Are you brave too?" Deja wiped her face with both hands. She picked up her phone and called Claudette. "I found a hidden bank account, a separate checking, and a lease in both their names. Forward me everything, today." Deja, this just became a much stronger case. She would not crumble. Not for Ben, not for the shame, not for the weight of 8 wasted years. She would stand, because her children were watching, because every woman who had ever been lied to and told she was crazy for suspecting it deserved to see what happens when one of them fights back. That night, Ben came home acting strange, nervous. He kept checking his phone. Then he sat at the table and cleared his throat. "Deja, we need to talk about something this weekend. There's something I need to tell you." Deja kept her face completely still. "Okay, whenever you are ready." Ben nodded, looking relieved. But Deja was not relieved because she already knew what he was going to say, and she knew it would not be the truth. Saturday morning. The kids were at Lorraine's house. Deja had arranged that deliberately. She wanted the house empty for whatever was about to happen. Ben stood in the kitchen, pacing, running his hand over his head the way he always did when he was nervous. Deja sat at the table with a cup of coffee she had no intention of drinking. She watched him the way a woman watches a man she used to love and now simply studies. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," Ben said. He looked at the ceiling, he looked at the floor, he looked everywhere except at her. "I have not been happy, for a while now. I think we need to take a break, some space, so I can figure out who I am." Deja set her coffee down slowly. "A break?" "Yes, just some time apart." "And that is all?" "That is all." No mention of Tiffany, no mention of the pregnancy, no mention of the apartment or the $14,000 or the secret bank account. He was not confessing, he was constructing an exit, the kind where he walks away looking like a man who needed to find himself, and she is left looking like the wife who could not keep her husband happy. Deja understood this with perfect clarity. Her father did the same thing to her mother, rewrote the story so the betrayal became somebody else's failure. Manipulators do not just lie, they build narratives, they craft roles, and the role Ben was assigning to Deja was the understanding wife who agrees to let him go without asking too many questions. She looked at the man she had married in a small church in Durham with wildflowers in her hair, the man who stood in the delivery room when Lila was born and cried harder than she did, the man who was now lying to her face and expecting her to believe it. Something shifted inside her. Not rage, something colder, clarity with teeth. "Okay," she said calmly, "let me think about it." Ben's shoulders dropped with relief. He even smiled. "Thank you, Deja. That is all I'm asking for." He walked out of the kitchen thinking he had won, thinking his wife was too trusting, too loyal to suspect anything more than a midlife crisis. He was wrong. That Sunday night, after Ben was asleep in the guest room, Deja sat in the living room with her phone. She scrolled to Tiffany Wells's number, the one she had pulled from Ben's phone days ago. She stared at it for a long time. Then she pressed call. She just called the other woman, and what Tiffany says next flips this entire story upside down. If you are not subscribed, you are about to miss the biggest twist. The phone rang 3 times. A voice answered. Young, cautious, a little sleepy. Hello? Who is this? My name is Deja Johnson. I'm Ben's wife. Silence. 3 seconds that felt like 30. Then the voice on the other end broke. Not the defensive anger Deja had expected, not denial, not hostility. Tiffany Wells began to cry. And it was not the crying of a woman caught doing something wrong. It was the crying of a woman who had just been told the sky above her was not real. Wife? Tiffany whispered. He told me we were divorced. He said you lived in another state. He said he had no children. We are not divorced. I live in Charlotte, in the house he leaves every time he flies to you, and we have 2 children. Lila is 7, Micah is 4. The crying on the other end became a sound Deja recognized because she had made that exact sound herself, on the bathroom floor, on the tile, when the sonogram appeared. It was the sound of a woman's entire reality collapsing. I showed him divorce papers, Tiffany said through sobs, signed with a court stamp. He said it was finalized 2 years ago. They were fake. I quit my job 3 months ago. He told me he would take care of everything, the apartment, the bills, the baby. He said we were starting a life together. Deja pressed her hand against her forehead and let the full picture settle. Ben had not just cheated, he manufactured an entire false identity. He told Tiffany he was divorced with no children, he showed her forged documents, he convinced a 26-year-old woman to quit her career, depend on him financially, and carry his child, all while going home every weekend to kiss his real children goodnight. This was not an affair. This was a con. Calculated, layered, sustained over months, and the victims were not one woman, they were 2. Tiffany, I didn't call to fight you. I called because I think we both deserve the truth, and I think we've been lied to by the same man in 2 different ways. Tiffany was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. What do you want to do? I want to sit in the same room with him, both of us, at the same time, and I want him to explain himself to the 2 women he built his lies on top of. When? And just like that, 2 women who had every reason to destroy each other chose to destroy the man who deceived them both instead. Wednesday evening, the house on Waverly Drive was spotless. Deja had cleaned it the way she cleaned her classroom for parent-teacher night, deliberate, precise, every surface reflecting order. The kitchen table was set with 3 chairs, not 4, 3. She texted Ben at 5. I thought about what you said. I want to talk tonight. Just us. Kids are at my mother's. Ben replied in under a minute. Good. I will be home by 6. He thought this was a reconciliation. He walked through the front door at 6:15, wearing his best sympathetic face, the one that says, I know this is hard, but I am doing what is best for both of us. Then he saw Tiffany sitting at the kitchen table. His face did something Deja would never forget. It did not just go pale, it collapsed. Every muscle that held his confidence in place failed at once. His jaw slackened, his eyes widened, his hand froze on the door handle like he was calculating whether he could still run. He could not. Sit down, Ben, Deja said. Her voice was level, practiced. She had rehearsed this moment in the mirror until the words came out without a single crack. Deja, what is going on? Why is she? Sit down. He sat. What followed was not a screaming match. It was not a scene from a television drama. It was worse. It was quiet, controlled, surgical. 2 women laying out the evidence of one man's deception in chronological order. Tiffany placed the fake divorce papers on the table. Deja placed the real marriage certificate beside them. Tiffany described the messages where Ben promised to take care of her. Deja showed the bank statements proving the money came from their joint savings. Tiffany described the apartment he called their fresh start. Deja described the nights she spent alone, wondering why her husband felt so far away. Ben tried everything. He cried, he apologized, he got angry, he accused Deja of going behind his back, he told Tiffany she was misunderstanding, he begged, he deflected, he blamed his childhood, he blamed his job, he blamed stress, he blamed everything, except himself. Neither woman flinched. They had already done their crying. They were not sitting at that table to be convinced. They were sitting there to be heard. When Ben ran out of excuses, Deja reached into a folder beside her chair and slid an envelope across the table. "These are the divorce papers. Already filed. Your attorney has been served." Ben stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. Then Tiffany spoke. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were burning. "And I called your company's HR department this morning. They are very interested in the expense reports you filed for your business trips to Atlanta, the ones where you billed the company for hotel rooms while you were sleeping at the apartment you leased with stolen money." Ben's mouth opened. Nothing came out. And for the first time since this story began, the man who controlled two separate realities had lost control of both at the same time. The aftermath unfolded over 3 months, quietly, steadily, like a tide reclaiming what it was owed. Ben was fired within 2 weeks. An internal audit confirmed over $23,000 in fraudulent expense claims, corporate travel funds used for personal trips, hotel reimbursements for nights he spent at an off-the-books apartment. The company erased him, cleared his desk, deactivated his badge, removed his name from every project file. The divorce was finalized 67 days after Deja filed. The evidence was overwhelming. Deja received the house, full primary custody, a significant alimony settlement, and the satisfaction of walking out of that courtroom knowing she had not begged, not screamed, not lowered herself to match the behavior of a man who never deserved the loyalty she gave him. But this chapter is not about Ben's fall. Falls are easy, predictable. The part worth telling is what Deja built after the fire. 3 weeks after the divorce, Deja sat in the school cafeteria at Briarwood on a Thursday evening. 12 women sat in folding chairs in front of her. Some were married, some were recently divorced, some were trying to figure out whether the life they were living was the one they had actually chosen. She organized a financial literacy workshop. She called it Know Your Worth, and it was not a class about budgeting. It was a class about the question nobody teaches women to ask. Do you know where your money actually goes? She told them her story, not the dramatic parts, the quiet parts, the parts where she trusted and did not verify, where she assumed shared finances meant shared honesty, where she gave her paycheck to a joint account and never once checked where the withdrawals were going. She told them about the $14,000, the hidden bank account, the lease, and the one thing she wished someone had told her years ago. Trust is not a financial strategy. Awareness is. Those 12 women told other women. The next week, 28 showed up. The week after, 41. Within 6 months, Know Your Worth was featured on a local Charlotte news station, then a regional network, then a women's empowerment conference in Raleigh where Deja spoke to 400 people and received a standing ovation. She kept the stuffed giraffe on her desk at school. When people asked about it, she always said the same thing. It reminds me that the truth sometimes hides in the smallest things. You just have to be brave enough to look. One evening, a letter arrived at the house on Waverly Drive. No return address. Inside was a photograph of a brand new stuffed giraffe, clean and bright and stitched perfectly, and a handwritten note. I named her Journey. She is healthy, and she will grow up knowing what a strong woman looks like, because 2 of them saved her mother. Tiffany. Deja held the letter against her chest and cried for the last time, not from pain, from something she had not felt in a very long time. Completion. From betrayal to a movement that changed hundreds of lives, If this story moved you, subscribe to Tales by Wave. Every story on this channel carries a lesson that could save someone you love. 1 year later, Deja Johnson stood at a podium inside the Charlotte Convention Center. 300 women filled the seats. Know Your Worth had expanded to 4 cities. She had partnered with a nonprofit called Second Ground that provides free legal consultations to women leaving financially abusive marriages. She had been featured in Essence magazine, and last month she signed a book deal. Lila, now 8, sat in the front row. She did not fully understand what her mother did, but she understood one thing. When her mother spoke, people listened, and when people listened, they changed. Deja and Tiffany were not best friends. That would be a fairy tale, and this is not a fairy tale. This is a story about what happens when 2 women choose clarity over destruction. Tiffany enrolled in a cosmetology business program and opened her own salon in Atlanta. She named it Glow Forward. She sent Deja photos of Journey on holidays. 2 women connected not by friendship, but by something rarer: shared survival. Ben worked at a warehouse distribution center in a town Deja never bothered to learn the name of. He tried reaching out twice, both times through email. Deja forwarded both to Claudette and never responded. Not out of bitterness, out of completion. There was nothing left to say to a man who taught her, through pain, exactly who she was always meant to become. At the convention center, Deja gripped the edges of the podium and looked out at 300 faces. Some were tear-streaked, some were defiant, some were just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying a life that does not fit anymore. She spoke without notes. I did not hide that toy to catch him. I hid it because something inside me already knew. And that is the lesson I want every woman in this room to carry home tonight. Your instincts are not paranoia. Your gut is not overreacting. When something feels wrong, it usually is. The question is not whether the truth will hurt. It will. The question is whether you will let the pain own you or whether you will turn it into the foundation of something that outlasts the person who broke you. She paused. The room was silent. I lost a husband. I lost 8 years. I lost $14,000 and a version of my life I thought was real. But I gained something no one can ever take from me. I gained myself, and I built something from the wreckage that is bigger than anything he ever gave me. She looked at Lila in the front row. Lila was smiling, the kind of smile only a child gives, pure, uncomplicated, proud. Betrayal does not define you, it refines you, and the woman who walks through fire and still chooses to build, she is the one who changes everything. The room erupted. 300 women on their feet, applause that rolled through the convention center like thunder. Deja stepped back from the podium, pressed her hand over her heart, and let the tears come. Not tears of sadness, tears of arrival. She had made it, not to a destination, to herself. That night, back on Waverly Drive, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Deja sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she confronted Ben, where 2 women chose justice over jealousy, and she picked up the stuffed giraffe. She held it the way she had held it that Friday morning, a year ago, when something in her gut whispered, "Do it," and something in her chest tightened like a fist. Back then, she did not know what the feeling meant. Now, she did. It was her own strength, waking up, refusing to be silent, demanding to be seen. She set the giraffe on the table and smiled, not a sad smile, not a bitter one, the kind of smile that belongs to a woman who burned down the life she was given and built a better one with her own hands. Your instincts are your first line of defense. When they speak, listen. Emotional discipline in the face of betrayal is not weakness, it is strategy. Never leave a broken situation without preparation. Knowledge is your power. Financial awareness is not suspicion, it is survival. know where your money goes. Before you hate the other person, ask what lies they were told. The real enemy may be standing between you both. Unity between the deceived is the most powerful response to deception. Betrayal does not define you, it refines you. What you build after the fire is the truest measure of who you are. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone who needs to hear this, subscribe to Tales by Wave. Every story on this channel carries a lesson that could change a life. And if you're still not subscribed, drop a comment and tell me what is holding you back.